Hello and welcome to WBZ and CBSN Boston's continuing coverage of the all-important Boston mayoral race. On September 14th, a nonpartisan preliminary election will narrow the field of candidates to two. WBZ TV and CBSN Boston are providing voters with a chance to directly compare the candidates' responses to four questions on issues you've said in poll after poll are most important to you. In this segment, we welcome the city's former Director of Economic Development, John Barros. John, thank you for joining us.
John, thanks for having me. It's nice to be included and to make sure that all the voices are being heard. I appreciate it.
We appreciate your voice. Let's start our conversation here with the city's housing crisis, where even large infusions of public money and pressure on developers just haven't yielded nearly enough affordable housing to meet demand. Now, a Brookings Institution study released last fall identified as a major problem, quote, exclusionary zoning by affluent, mostly white communities, exacerbating racial and economic segregation in the region, limiting Black and Latino or Hispanic families' access to high opportunity communities, end quote. So it seems Chapter 40B, the state affordable housing law aimed at mitigating exclusionary zoning, isn't really getting the job done. What will you do as mayor to push suburban governments and Beacon Hill to fix this problem?
You know, John, it's a problem. Boston, in fact, continues to be a city that is far too expensive. Too many of our families are being displaced, and too many of our young professionals can't find a home and are forced to move out of our city. We need to be a city that creates opportunities for all of our residents, all of our families, and all of our young professionals, you know, folks who have grown up here and now have a good job. I'll work with the state and other cities directly to make sure, in fact, that we approach this from a regional standpoint, a statewide standpoint. It's not just about the laws on the books. It's in fact that people feel that this is something they can do. And so working with state government is important, but working with our neighboring cities is just as important. As Chief of Economic Development, in fact, I ran the city's regional compact. I have relationships. We need to make sure that all of the cities in our region are sharing the burden for housing.
Could you see yourself up on Beacon Hill lobbying for a toughening of 40B?
Well, I think it's important that the mayor of Boston be part of legislative talks, be part of what's happening in our state in ways that it impacts our city. So yes, I can see myself at the State House lobbying for the different changes that we need to make sure, in fact, that we continue to be an accessible city to all.
Okay, John, this year, the city is spending millions of dollars on a marketing campaign that you know well. You were one of the architects of it, to persuade outsiders that Boston is, quote, all-inclusive, an explicit effort, correct me if I'm wrong, to counter the nagging image of Boston as a racially unwelcoming environment. Does that message that the campaign is sending out really match the reality of life for people here for people of color in Boston? And if not, what do you intend to do about that problem beyond the ad campaign?
You know, the all-inclusive ad was really important. It's a historic campaign. In fact, the city of Boston has never put out a marketing campaign in that way, but this is the time to do it. We need to make sure that people understand that Boston's safe to visit and that we invite them back in. Now, as we do it, we took the opportunity to show some really different places that you can go. All of the images, all of the restaurants, all of the places that we're inviting people to check out in Boston are real. Those are real people. Those are real places that you can visit. In fact, you can make sure that you have a very diverse experience in Boston. Boston's a very global, international city. You can also, if you want, have a very bland experience in Boston and not see those neighborhoods and not see those restaurants. All of that is authentic. Boston can be many cities to many different people. What we're asking people to do, in fact, is just to broaden your horizon. Check out some local restaurants. Take it on a path that you typically haven't traveled before. Boston has a lot to offer, and we wanted to showcase it.
Is there anything more you think you could do to make people of color, whether they live here or not, feel more comfortable about being here?
Absolutely. When we looked at that at the city of Boston and tourism and what we were doing, in 2015, there was a study done of likely African American travelers and likely Latino travelers, and both scored Boston very low. The African American travelers scored Boston 10 out of 10, the lowest possible. Latino scored a 9 out of 10. We are losing billions and billions of dollars from travelers who would be coming to our city if we had a different image. We need to make sure we create the infrastructure that is saying to diverse travelers that you are welcome to Boston, that you will find places to eat, you will find places to go out and hang out. That's why, as Chief of Economic Development for the city, I was able to work with entrepreneurs to begin to create new places, like the Jazz Urbane Cafe, which will be a new jazz lounge that will hopefully open in Boston in 2022, to make sure that we can showcase the amazing talent that we have in our city. And so when people come to town, they can find a place to go and listen to African American music. This is something that Boston needs to foster throughout our entire city. Let's showcase our talent, let's showcase our diversity, and let's make sure that people can find it.
All right, let's turn to educational opportunity. Last time we checked, Boston's METGO program, which buses more than 3,000 children of color each year to suburban schools, had a waiting list of 15,000 families. There are thousands more on waiting lists to get into the city's charter schools. These families obviously want an alternative to the conventional public schools. What, if anything, will you do for them as mayor?
You know, John, I believe in Boston public schools. It's clear education is critical to the future of our city, our residents, our families, and our economy. Developing a district and investing in public schools that produces the top talent that we need to continue to grow as a city, that we need to address the inequities of our society is critical. It starts with developing a more seamless birth to career educational pipeline that guarantees accessibility, high quality education, and training. This is a priority. Prioritizing public education is one of the most important ways that we can address some of the social ills of our time. That means that we're doing 4 things. And in fact, I announced this Monday that I, as mayor, would invest $4 billion to make sure that every neighborhood in the city of Boston has a quality school, has quality tier 1 seats. And that makes sure not just the building, and that the building is sustainable and we're addressing climate resilience, but that we're also fully funding the kinds of programs that we need to address the ELL students, the special needs students, and the high concentration of poverty in our system. Second is we need to make sure that every student has the opportunity to, have opportunities. In fact, we need to bridge the opportunity gap that our students face with trauma, with homelessness, with food insecurity. Students have to be ready to learn when they get to school, and so we have to wrap around our students and their families to do that. Third, we need to make sure, in fact, that Boston Public Schools is working in a way that helps students to get to careers. So I've put out a plan for the Madison Parkville Tech School. There's no reason, with all of the jobs that we have with our emerging industries, that Boston Public Schools don't have robust pathways to get to them. Third, tomorrow, I'm going to announce a citywide city college program. This is something that's critical. We can work with the minority serving institutions in our city and coordinate them so that BPS students have a clear pathway to them, and that we're helping to cover the tuition needed for them to get their associates and move on to their bachelor's.
At existing universities, you're not talking about creating a new city college.
No, at existing universities. We've got
Okay.
amazing universities in Boston. You're talking about the Cambridge College, which now is located in Boston, Roxbury
I see.
Community College, Bunker Hill, the Benjamin Franklin Institute. Does an amazing job. There's no reason why we shouldn't have a partnership with those schools to move our students forward.
In the meantime, while you're working to improve the conventional public schools, what about more charter school seats? Good idea or not?
You know, charter schools have been an amazingly important school model for us. We've learned a lot from them. Because of charter schools, we've pushed for longer school days, and it's been really effective. Because of some of the work that they've done, I've been pushing for making sure that we got a 12-month school year. There's no reason why Boston families, when they leave BPS in May, June, that they don't have some kind of a structure for their summer, whether it's a camp, an enrichment opportunity, some sort of academic makeup, whatever the situation they find themselves in, they should have something structured. No child should go home and go home to a key in an empty apartment because their parents working and they've got nothing to do.
All right, finally, let's turn to public safety. This year is the 25th anniversary of the birth of Boston's Operation Ceasefire, otherwise known as the Boston Miracle. That was an innovative effort to reverse an epidemic of deadly gun violence based on unprecedented cooperation between Boston police, federal, state, and county law enforcement, clergy, and street workers. For years, it was a national model, then it fell apart. Do you understand why it fell apart? What will you do to fix it? Or do you prefer an alternate model to the Boston Miracle?
John, nothing beats the community partnerships that we saw during the Boston Miracle. Police working with the faith-based community, the community organizations, community leaders. I remember being a part of the coalitions that were formed through the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative and the work that I did in Roxbury. It was critical, in fact, that we had communication, open lines, that we had tables where we can all sit and talk about what was happening and what we needed to do better. As mayor, making sure that we have a table where everyone can sit to solve problems together is what I'm going to be all about. It's how I did my work in the neighborhoods. It's how Boston has made improvements in safety. It's how we've made improvements in any area that we've made improvements in. It is critical that Boston police continue to have those relationships throughout our neighborhoods.
John Barros, Boston's former economic development director. If people want to find out more about you and your campaign, how do they do that?
Well, you can visit my website at barrosformayor.com. And, I'll say this. You can also email me at john@barrosformayor.com. Would love to continue the conversation with our voters and let them know what I'm thinking about, what I've done, and what I would do as mayor. This is a pivotal race. And what I bring to this race that's different than some of the other candidates is the experience that I have in government on the executive side. I have been there for 7 years, making sure that our city is run well with AAA bond rating throughout the 7 years, making sure that we've grown our economy by bringing 140,000 jobs to our city while bringing down unemployment to 2.4%. As mayor, I'll make sure that we have a way to engage all of us in the conversation and no one's left out, and that we continue to improve our city for everyone.
Mr. Barros, I appreciate your time. Boston mayoral candidate John Barros. Now, if you'd like to hear how the other 4 candidates in the preliminary election coming up on September 14th responded to those same questions, just click on the appropriate links on this website. And whatever you do, make sure you get out and vote on September 14th in the preliminary. Then watch your vote count on our continuing coverage on WBZ TV and on CBSN Boston. Thank you for watching.